Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, and this bin behind me is the one that I want to check in on today. Like I do sometimes, I've got this little information board prepared with some facts and figures about the system. It's a week away from reaching 200 days of age. It's the oldest of my systems, if you don't count the outdoor worm bag. And during its first 145 days, it was doing composting. I ran 14 separate feedings through that thing before finally deciding 48 days ago, just a day short of 7 weeks, that it had received its last feeding. We're going to let it forage. So that's what it's doing right now. That's what the little dot 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 over here indicates. And what would normally follow that is some sort of method for separating the worms from their castings, be it, using light to drive them down in the material and then you scoop away the material, or other methods. The method that I'm going to be using is the method where you try to lure the worms out of the material that they're in. It's not only luring them out, but it's also repelling them by letting the material start to dry at that point. So whether or not we're going to actually start into the migration phase today, though, is what remains to be seen. I'm going to get into the bin now, and we're going to see how it looks. It's been 10 days since we last checked in on it, so hopefully it's getting to the point where we can consider transitioning it to the next phase. So let's get to work. Okay, I've got my glove on and I'm ready to go, and I actually put on some long sleeves because it's a bit chilly down here. I might have been a little bit, I don't know. Ooh. This is what I've been finding in all of my systems where there's a cardboard top. And one by one I've been removing the cardboard top. You know what I also find is that down within the corrugated layers is where they seem to be hiding out. If I take this piece of material and I start slapping it, stuff, not by stuff, I mean flying insects start coming out of the corrugated layers. So I might have to go ahead and get my bug zapper and run it down here for a little while, see if I can work down to the point where I don't have these little insects anywhere in my systems. But I think that we're going to do away with that cardboard at this point, because it does seem to be the culprit in all my systems where I'm observing these little flying insects. And well, no, I guess the culprit's me for allowing it to be that way. The cardboard can't help it. So, yeah, I don't know. I've never seen that in the past. Maybe it's just some sort of a seasonal thing. Since it's cold, maybe they'd rather be outside. When it warms up, they'll maybe head outside. But for now, they're using my wormery as a shelter. So now, I'd really like to get this system out of foraging at this point. 48 days seems like plenty of time. We did collect all the little scraps of leftover banana peel stems and things like that we were able to find last time we were in here, and we sort of centralized them into the middle of the bin. And we thought that might result in us having a little bit of a more worm dense spot in the middle of the bin where those food items were. At this point, I'm not really attempting to locate and collect up those items, but if we stumble on them, I guess we could. This I don't think is even a banana stem. I think it's just a stick. Something that you probably wouldn't expect to see break down very soon. Here, this is what I believe I had predicted to be the winner, if you want to consider it the winner, or the loser, maybe, better said. The last item in the system that seemed like it would take the greatest amount of time to break down. It's kind of like that jumble end of a bunch of bananas, where one of the stems to one of the bananas is still attached to it. I believe when it started, it actually had two. So it did eventually lose one of them, but the other one stayed on there. And then there was a few other banana stems, which at some point close to the end, they really start looking like nothing more than just a bunch of little fibers stacked together. So there's really not much left as far as leftovers go in here. And that's kind of what we were expecting to see. Another banana stem. So that was pretty much everything that we found. I don't know if there was something else. I do distinctly remember the majority of the things that we located and assembled together in a little pile were banana stems. So all the stuff that's out here from where we excavated is probably going to be mainly castings, maybe a little residual bedding bits, and maybe a couple banana stems that don't really have a whole lot of material left in them anymore, except for that one that's got the big nub end on it. So we've collected a number of items together that might classify as leftovers at this point. What's this? Didn't look like food. It seemed like maybe just a wad of residual bedding that got stuck together. Well, let's let it stay together. We'll just add it to our little collection of leftovers here. Because, you know, I think we're going to initiate the migration, and we can just use that stuff right in the feeding zone that we're going to establish for these little guys. I've got stuff I can bring down. I didn't come down anticipating that we were going to do it. I knew that I wanted to do it, but I wanted to see for myself if now, 10 days later, you know, did we see a reduction in the leftovers? There might have been, I don't know, maybe 50% more than this when we placed it in here last time. So it is getting worked down, but I'm not going to let this hold us back from progressing to the next stage. Because even while we're migrating the worms, this so-called foraging activity obviously continues within the material. So the worms aren't just going to stop eating because now they realize there's another section of the bin where there's food piled up for them. As they make their way there and end up staying there because it's nice and, you know, well stocked with food, they'll be continuing to eat this stuff as they move through it and eventually move out of it. And if there's still a little bit of, you know, leftover stuff scattered within it, that's not the end of the world either. We're not shooting for perfection here. So let's, before we set up the what I refer to as the horizontal migration feeding zone, I just thought we might do a quick aeration of all the material within the bin rather than just setting up the migration zone. I'm not sure when we really had a chance to really pour through all of the material thoroughly. So I think a little bit of aeration certainly can't hurt. I'm even wondering if it might be time to just not only omit the cardboard covering on top, but also forget about the plastic. And that'll, you know, get us right into that phase of migrating the worms in such a way that the material is now drying out rapidly. And I think the worms can sense it too. As the moisture leaves the material, they could probably sense that happening, and then that already probably triggers sort of a natural impulse to go find a place that's a little bit more rich in moisture, a little bit more damp. So it'll be to our benefit to watch this stuff gradually dry out a little bit, and it'll result in the worms getting mobile, trying to find a better spot to be. I just found another little stem of a banana peel there, so I figured I'd include it in our collection of stuff to include when we establish our feeding zone. I don't remember anything special in terms of feeding patterns within the system, so I'm assuming we had always just fed down the middle here. So I just wondered if when we excavate the middle, if we would find possibly a higher concentration of worms. Actually, this side of the bin that we're going to get to last is where the label of the container is. And I guess what that really indicates is that the label is the side of the bin that faces into the room so that I can read the label. And by being the side of the bin that is facing inward, I sometimes have a feeling that it might be a little bit warmer and more comfortable on this side of the bin, especially when there's a really breezy day and a little bit more of the cold air from outside sneaks in alongside the walls of the basement. That's when I really think that there's probably a considerable temperature difference between, you know, the side of the bin that's inboard versus the side of the bin that's facing the wall. And for that reason, I think on a few occasions too, we've tested that hypothesis and actually found a larger concentration of worms hanging out on the side of the bin that faces inward. So I wonder if we'll see something like that here too. I like the fact that we're kind of airing out all this material, so I'm definitely not trying to squash it down or, you know, maximize its use of the available space. I want it to remain kind of aerated and have some gaps and stuff so that it'll help with the drying of the material. And I've got a piece of newspaper over on the side. I think we're going to use that to cover up with. I'll just sort of fold it up in a way that it does really nice cover edge to edge. So it'll protect a little bit from the evaporation, but not nearly as much as the plastic does. It'll allow for a good bit of moisture to gradually escape, but not too quickly. And I think we'll go without the cardboard too. Here, let's get all these little leftovers that we'll use later. Maybe we'll find a few more even. But this might be the material in which we find the greatest number of worms hanging out, because maybe it is a little bit warmer. And there again, I can't tell you that it's warmer. I can't tell from just touching it. There's no difference as far as I could tell in the temperature. Perhaps there is a little bit more of a worm density in this stuff. And maybe it is because of the warmer temperature in here. I don't know. So this is kind of nice to be able to see so many worms in this material. And since there's been no fresh feedings, the worms have been, scattering throughout the material looking for food, I'm sure. So we're probably not finding any sort of a major concentration here. This is probably, other than maybe because of the slightly warmer material. But I'll probably suggest that most of the material in the bin is populated almost as densely as what we're seeing here. Maybe not quite as much, but close to it. And it's so remarkable if you go into the playlist that I created, that this video is also going to be part of. It actually tracks the entire life of this little population of worms from a point in time where we had trouble finding even 1 or 2 worms within the system in the very beginning, up to now, where there's hundreds of worms in here, obviously. And it's so cool. It's so nice to see after just a few months how they can bounce back from almost complete obliteration. So I don't know if we're going to stay this high. We might drop the overall depth of this material after we've built our migration zone and backfilled. But I got to go grab some things with which we can set up a feeding zone, which I don't intend to make as large as it is here. I'm probably going to use about half of this space. I just wanted to make sure that I've got all the worms out of here and that I got enough room to work. So it's break time now. I'll go get a few things that we could set up this feeding zone with. I've got some prepared bedding we could use for that as well, and then we'll be done. I got a feeling once the worms catch wind of the fact that there's a huge assortment of delicious foods laid out over on this side of the bin, they're going to come running. And besides an assortment of delicious foods, we've also got my high-tech moisture application apparatus. In other words, we can make this section of the bin nice and damp so that too, whether it's the food, the dampness, whatever the case may be, we're going to be attracting them over to this side big time. And in case you were wondering, yes, we are going to have a dividing partition between the feeding zone and the finished compost where the worms are. So I always want to make it really easy for the worms to pass through my little partition wall. So I'm just going to punch it full of holes. So when we lay it in there, if the worms want to come across, it'll be really easy for them to do so. But if later on we want to have a clear divider between the migration feeding zone and the finished compost, we'll have that too. That should work pretty good. Alright, so let's kind of rough fit this thing in where we believe we want it to be, somewhere around here, I guess. I've got some of these tubes, cardboard tubes, little chunks of them. It seemed like if I position them upright, maybe they'll kind of hold up for a little while before they collapse. That'll kind of give us this weird illusion as if the worms have moved in and eaten almost everything. When we come back in here, it'll be probably a lot lower than the way we left it. So we're going to create ourselves a little bit of an illusion here. So let's bring over some of my pre-made bedding. I mean, this stuff is, dampened and is stored damp, but not very damp. So it's part of the reason I wanted my squirt bottle here. I want this stuff to be really nice and moist for the worms. Alrighty, maybe we'll even start with putting in some some of the food, because one of the food items, as you'll recall, was coffee, and a good bit of it. Oh my goodness. Oh, this filter is just way overloaded. Alright, I was running low on filters, so what I did was I started, this might sound cheesy, but I would, just not refill, because I would just reuse the filter that was already in the machine from the day before and just pile in a little bit more coffee on top of what was in there already for that day's brew. And only get rid of the filter after it was basically full like that. Alright, so this is going to be good. Not only is this the peel of a banana, but inside of it there's also a good bit of actual yummy banana that they're going to go crazy for, I would think. So I'm a little bit covered in coffee here. Not a big deal. I'll just have to clean things off at the end a little bit better than I normally have to. Alright, so I think we've already got enough substance here that's not going to allow for the little divider wall to slide away. So I think we can begin backfilling, so I don't need to dedicate a hand to holding up our little divider wall here. And once again, I'm not putting it there to divide anything really. I just want to be able to keep all of this uncomposted material separate from what's for the most part finished castings at this point. And then we're going to cover up this feeding area. We're going to allow this area to remain pretty well ventilated, covered with only paper, but we will use plastic coverings, and they'll cover only this section of the bin where we want things to remain nice and damp and keep the moisture circulating. It would seem that in all the commotion we've disrupted our little friend who was living over here beneath the handle of my box. He came out to see, hey, what the heck is going on? Or maybe he just came out to get a little drink. Or I meant to shoo him away, or maybe I could just work around him. I'll have to be careful. Luckily there's not a whole lot left for us to do here, so let's just get on with it and get done with it. There's a few more little pieces of banana peel and melon that we could place in here. Jeez, did I knock him in there? I didn't mean to. I guess I was just trying to see if I can pick up the pace here and get this job done. So now we've got all kinds of delicious food stacked into this feeding area here. It does seem like a bit much, but I got a feeling it's not going to look so impressive once all those cardboard tubes down low start to collapse in. Let's drop in a little bit more moisture before we stack in a final little portion of bedding to cover things up with here. Oh, there's also, speaking of a final portion, there was still a little bit more coffee here too. So let's empty this coffee, and then I guess at the same time we could use it to cover up some of this food. Because we're going to be pretty near the surface here. I'll try to cover up pretty thoroughly to, limit the amount of, I don't know, attractiveness a big pile of bananas and melons might cause for any sort of passerby creatures or insects. I don't want to create something out here on the surface of the system that's going to, lead to all kinds of creatures trying to come over for a piece of it. So I guess we just want to also provide the worms with a little bit of medium to traverse if they come through one of the holes over there. Let's make sure we stuff that little hole down there as well. So that looks really cool, and it will drop, I'm guessing, a good inch or so, at least a few centimeters. Maybe 2.5 centimeters if that cardboard stuff at the bottom begins to collapse. And there also appears to be a difference here too, but I still haven't really backfilled over here yet. So let's get that done, and we'll be finished here. Then I just need to grab a piece of newspaper that I've got over here on the side that I think is going to be just right for covering up with here. And some sort of plastic covering too. Perhaps not that big, huge piece of bubble wrap that we've been using in here for plastic coverings up until now. Perhaps something a little bit smaller would be adequate. Trying to keep it all nice and airy out here. I'd like for it to be able to shed some of its moisture real easily. And now I just found a banana stem, and I'm not remembering if we had bought over the stuff or did we just sort of mix it in. You know what? I'm not going to sweat it. My hope was to really remove all distraction type materials like that and get it out of the finished compost so that they really got reason to leave. You know, lack of food, lack of moisture, everything kind of stacking the deck in my favor so that the worms do my bidding. But you know what? It'll be fine. I think it'll be just great. So I folded up this supermarket circular piece of newspaper to sort of fit neatly into this space here to provide fairly thorough covering. I don't want any of this stuff to just suddenly flash dry. I really do want it to be somewhat protected from very rapid drying so that it dries gradually, doesn't become all hard and crumbly. I think that a nice slow drying is probably what helps keep the material, you know, a little bit finer, not just let it seize up into a hard little boulder. And I think maybe one more little dousing with water would be a good thing. I think as far as plastic coverings go, you know, I thought about finding something else, something smaller, but I think for now we'll just use what was on here before. We'll fold it in half so it limits the amount of coverage that it provides. And it's also got a bunch of castings that really belong in here. So once that dries, it'll be easier to tamp off those stuck-on castings, keep them with where they belong, and then maybe later, after we've had a chance to reclaim the castings that are stuck to this thing, we'll be able to replace it as we, I don't know, maybe we'll just keep it, you know, maybe the size of the feeding area will gradually increase, you know, and then maybe something this size will be a little bit more appropriate. But for now, it just seems like it's a bit much. We'll just use it temporarily. All right, that's it. We're now out of foraging and officially migrating our original population of worms. It's such a nice population of worms too, so fun to check in on these little guys. So that's it for the video. I've got a few things that I need to take care of, putting away and cleaning up, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. Before I go though, really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.